Hello, and welcome back to the Elevate Your Running podcast. This is Coach Sarah, and today I have a fabulous guest with me on the podcast today. I have Carolyn Coffin. Hi, Caroline. How you doing?
Hi, Sarah. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you to be here now. If you're not familiar with Caroline, she is a running coach. She has her own podcast. She is an athlete, and she got into the marathon distance just a handful of years ago. And we're going to talk all about her experience at the Marathon Project just a few months ago in Arizona. It's a newer style race, and there's a lot of really cool aspects to this race. We're going to talk about what happened and how to flow through what happened during her race and all the things that kind of come from having a tough day out there with belief shifts and trusting yourself again and so much more. I'm so excited about this. Caroline, do you want to introduce yourself and like kind of fill in some gaps that I left
Yeah,
out? Okay, great.
for sure. And stop me if I start to go on and on because I can do that too. Yeah, so my name's Carolyn Coffin. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. We were just talking a little bit before we hit record. It's very cold here right now, and it's really bumming me out with my training for Boston. So that's always the tricky thing about Boston or spring marathons in general, I guess, that probably people listening have contended with. You do all your training through the winter and like those really cold months, and you could get a super hot day. Like Boston can be quite hot. So yes, currently training for Boston, trying to do as much as I can outdoors whenever possible, but also a lot of treadmill miles right now. Host of the Inspired Souls podcast. I have been running for probably 10 to 15 years, kind of what I would call seriously, with structure, with guidance, with coaching, that type of thing. I guess I started back in 2012. I had sort of dabbled most of my life with running. I would just jump into the odd local race here and there. But it was really 2012 after my kids were both born. I have two teenagers right now. So after they were both born, and I kind of wanted that thing for me. And I had asked my brother, who is a very good runner. He was like a 2:21 marathoner back in his day. And I said, hey, would you, coach me? Do you ever think I could run under 45 minutes for a 10K? And he said yes. And I couldn't believe it because at that point I was I think 48-minute 10K runner. And anyway, he started coaching me and the time just kept falling. And you know how addictive that can get early on when you take like minutes and minutes off every single time you line up. So that was really fun. So that was kind of between 2012 and 2015, I guess. I was doing the 5K to the half marathon, really. And I really credit my brother a lot. Like he coached me to really value those shorter distances and get competent at them, to get really good at them, to not move up in distance all the time until you'd really maximized what you could get out of the shorter distances. And so that's, I guess, kind of like a belief system, I guess, that I have. I sometimes think people skip developmental steps a bit and rush off to longer and longer distances, maybe a bit prematurely. But again, there's lots of different ways to go about it. But I loved mastering kind of those shorter distances in those years. And then in 2015, I said to my brother, what do you think about me doing a marathon? I had done one way back in the year 2000. I did the Marine Corps Marathon in 2000 off hardly any training. Like I dare to say that it was a couch to marathon type of situation, which I do not recommend. And it was not pleasant or fun. And I ran 4:17. So in 2015, after I'd had some success at the shorter distances, I said, what do you think? Should I try it again? So I lined up at the Vermont City Marathon and I ran 3:21. So I almost took an hour off of my marathon, but anyway, so
That's incredible.
that was a little bit about and then that got me into Boston, and then I ran Boston in 2016, and that was not a very fun experience for me. And then I sort of shelved the marathon for several years until 2020.
Awesome. And then you've run a handful of marathons since, and it's really like that distance that you're really learning to crack the code at, because I think there's just so many different factors that go in 6.2, not just for the day, but also the training cycle too. I mean, there's a lot of different moving pieces and things have to, although they might ebb and flow throughout the training and as well on race morning, there still has to be a forward trajectory to be able to confidently go into a race and confidently finish a race or finish a race. I want to go back to your first marathon though. Taking a full hour off of your time, were you like nervous going into this race? Did you feel like did you know you were in shape for 321? Did you feel like you were just it was a whole new experience and you kind of forgot that first marathon? Can you kind of like share more about that?
Well, the first marathon was such a jarring experience for me. I swore I would never, ever, ever do it again. So the fact that I was even towing the line at all was perhaps the biggest miracle of all. But yeah, no, like I said, because I had gotten I'd figured out my way around some of the shorter distances by that point. I thought, no, I feel kind of ready and excited to tackle it. And by that point, I think my half marathon was getting pretty close, or it might have already been sub 90 by that point. So I thought, I could probably do like a 3:15 or something like that. Like I actually thought I might be capable of running an hour faster than the first one. So yeah, that's another thing. Again, we look at a lot as coaches, right? Is those kind of equivalent performances, and what do I even shoot for when I haven't run this distance in 15 years? Like, how do we know? Well, we know by looking at kind of some of your other fitness indicators.
Absolutely. Those data points are huge. They're so important to be able to say, like, this is what you're capable of. And also for that athlete to really like lean into it and absorb it. I'm wondering, and now this conversation is going in a totally different direction. What is your coaching advice to someone who maybe, let's say they just crush a 140 half marathon, which is 740 pace, and they are looking to go into a marathon build, and the concept of running 8 minutes per mile or 8:05, which would be the equivalent of the half to the marathon, which is it's right around 3:30, a 3:30 marathon, blows their mind and they cannot wrap their mind around it. What coaching advice would you give them to help get them comfortable with that idea that they can do that?
Yeah, well, interestingly, and I coach this athlete quite a lot, like that athlete that's right around the 140. And I feel like I feel like they come there quite convinced that they can do 8 minutes per mile. Like I can crush a 3:30 because it feels like an 8 minute mile pace feels quite a bit slower than what they would be racing for a half marathon. And so I find myself actually more talking to them about, okay, but the marathon is a very different beast than the half marathon. And I think perhaps that comes a little bit out of my own experience as an athlete, is that it is astounding to me every single time I race a marathon, just how that pace, because marathon pace is not particularly difficult, right? Like we can go out and run it for hours at a time, right?
Right.
And we've done that hopefully in training, run chunks of marathon pace, like big chunks and stuff. So it's like, no, I can do that. But it's every single time blows my mind that feels so different at mile 20 than it does, just in your everyday training run. So I actually find myself more talking to my clients about respecting the distance, and why don't we start off at kind of 8:10, and warm up into it and speed up as we go along, and really having to have some serious conversations about trying to be a bit more conservative and more patient.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you ever find that?
Oh, yeah. I think that's super important. I'm a big believer in the progression for the marathon for sure. I think it's the best way to race unless you're at a very, I would say, experienced elite level where you have the confidence to say, okay, maybe I'll go out 5 seconds slower than goal pace, lock in and try and take a few seconds off in the second half or something like that. But that takes a lot of skill. And, I think it just makes me nervous talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think to me, it feels very natural and normal to say like, okay, if your half marathon pace is X, let's say 740 for the example, and we're backing up 20, 25, 30 seconds per mile, you should 1,000% be able to double the distance. And it is going to get hard at some point during the race. Could it be for a mile or a kilometer or 2 kilometers? Perhaps it could. It could also be one of those races where it just gets hard at a certain point and then it just doesn't let up and you're in it, you know?
Yeah.
You got to find a way, you got to find a way through, whether that's finishing or not finishing. But I have a few athletes right now who just absolutely smashed half marathons, and they're going into a marathon build and they don't even want to touch the equivalent of what they could race. They want to run something very like significantly slower. So maybe it's going to be like over the time of the build, I can convince them through pacing and patience that they can do it.
Yeah. And I guess everybody's a little bit different in that way, whether they're going to be like extra conservative type of racers or if overconfident or somewhere in the middle. So I guess it does a little bit depend on the athlete sitting in front of you. And I've certainly had many conversations with many athletes saying, no, like the data that's come back from your training shows that this is possible for you. Like I believe in you, like let's, open up your training log and let's review everything that points to you being able to actually be able to go out and do this on race day. So those are fun conversations to have too.
Those are fun, very fun conversations to have. That's a great segue into our topic for today. So you just recently ran a marathon. You ran the Marathon Project in Arizona in December. And this is a race that came back. It originally, I think, it had a debut year in 2020. Is that right? And then they took some time off. They came back in 2025 and it was it was like a smaller race. You needed a 3:30 time qualifier to participate. It was a 4-mile flat looped course. You had pacers, you had bottle support. You're heading into this marathon. You are looking to crush that 3:21:55 PR that you ran all those years ago. What data points did you have going into that race that told you, yes, I can. Yes, I can do this?
Yeah. So again, and this might be, so to answer your question, a lot of data points. Like I had probably the best training cycle of my whole life, which let's put a pin in that and perhaps circle around. I had run the most mileage consistently, feeling excellent, still being able to hit workouts, still being able to do the long run. I had run 134 half marathon untapered in the middle of the build. Like I had, and I'm coming off of a year. 2025 was such a fun year for me race-wise because I started it with indoor track. Again, where we live, it's awesome that we have the facilities cool. And everybody moves indoors in the winter because it does get so cold. So last year, and I do that pretty much every winter, but last year we were actually going to be hosting the Canadian Masters Athletics Indoor National Championships in early March. And so I participated in the whole indoor season, racing 1500s, 3000s. I even did a 5000 indoors on the track, which is 25 laps of a 200-meter track. Anyway, all of that went excellent and well. So I think I'd probably raced 4 1500s, 3 3000s, a 5000 on the track all before March. Like a lot of, and I ran an all-out 1500-meter personal best as a 48-year-old.
That's amazing.
In, March. Early March. And then transitioned to kind of my like spring season where I did a couple 5Ks, a couple 10Ks. Between spring and fall, I did 3 half marathons. And then the marathon, everything was kind of in service of this marathon at the end of the year. So what data points did I have? I raced 17 times last year between all those distances that I just said. And every single one of them said I should be able to run a 3:16 or a 3:17 marathon.
Yeah.
I felt very confident with the way the training went, with the way my racing went, with the way that I was feeling, that I actually thought like 3:21:55 is my personal best, but I actually thought 3:20 would have been quite conservative. And like you mentioned, this race was sort of set up. They had the hashtag as fast as possible. Like everything was sort of geared towards helping athletes run their very best, from the course to the pacers to the personal bottles and like the smaller race environment and tons of bathrooms and an indoor warm-up area and all this stuff beforehand. They were treated essentially like elites. And they were having these pacers at 3:20, which, you know, most races have pacers at 3:20, but they had pacers 2:40, 2:35, like all the way down, I think, to 2:20, maybe. Anyway, they had 5 pacers at every 5-minute increments, like all the way from, I think, up to 3:30.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I thought, you know, I think I like to race sort of conservatively. Like I like to race especially a marathon, like ramp up into it, like I was saying before. And I thought starting off at 3:20, which is a 7:38 mile pace, I thought that was going to be conservative. So I was in for a pretty rude awakening pretty early in this race, like mile 1, where we hit a 7:38 on the nose, but I'm like, it's just feeling hard. Like, I don't know why. It just doesn't feel like a 7:38 at the beginning of a marathon should feel to me, given that I can go and, you know, race a 1:34 half marathon. Well, I don't even know what that is it's probably like it's
like a 7:20 per mile.
Yeah. I'm like mile 1 at a 7:38. And I feel like, whoa, that doesn't feel right. Okay, maybe it's just a wonky mile or something. So things started to go off the rails pretty early.
I'd say so. First mile. That's a really tough place to be in the first mile. Did you warm up before the race? And were you thinking like, oh, I just need to like maybe warm up a little bit more? Because sometimes that's what we know to be true with marathon training. You need
absolutely
a lot of kilometers or miles to finally like get into your groove.
Yeah.
So you noticed that in the first mile. So when did you start to think this might just be the day?
Yeah. Again, unfortunately, it was pretty early on.
Yeah.
I would say like for sure by 5K and especially by 10K, I was like, no, this is just the day. And what am I going to do? You know, and this is probably where I have my biggest regrets about the race is that I race planned with my coach and, you know, we talked about the whole 3:20 thing. And I had even said to him, what do you think about me just being like off the back? Like, I know they're having a 3:20 pacer and a 3:25 pacer. I said, what do you think if I was just like hanging out between the two? And then, you know, there's going to be tons of people fall off the pace groups and I'll just use them as like bait or whatever. And he's like, you know, it can be psychologically harder to not be in a pace group, which is, I also know that too. And I was like, yeah, good point. And I am fitter, I think, than 3:20. So that should be fine. The regret comes in when I felt that so early on, like 1 mile and then still by 5K. And I'm like, I really should have dropped back then, I think. And I probably could have salvaged the race and maybe even salvaged the personal best, to be honest, because the personal best was 3:21 high.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, were you feeling like heavy legs, fatigued legs, or was like the pacing just feeling like extra hard, like half marathon effort, or was it both?
No, it didn't feel like half marathon effort. It just felt like it's very hard to describe. And again, I'm 48 years old. I grew up in an era where there wasn't GPS watches. Like I've learned the skill of listening to my body and running by effort.
Yeah.
And I feel very fortunate that I have learned that actually, because like, I'll give you an example. I was racing our Canadian 10K championships in Ottawa in May.
Yeah.
And I had some like absolutely brutal travel and stuff like that getting to that race. And anyway, I knew in my shakeout the day before, I'm like, ooh, I don't feel that good. And then the first half of the race, I did not feel good. And I was like, well, whatever. Like, and that race wasn't my, you know, goal race of the season or anything like that. So I just backed way off.
Yeah.
And I went through 5K. I forget what I went through. It was like 21, 30 something. So like on track for north of 43 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, 43 minutes. Like, I'm not even going to break 43 today. Oh my gosh. I think it was going to be 43:10 or something if I just doubled it. And then in the second half of the race, I started to feel better and better. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Like, I feel great. I'm just going to run with this. And I just cranked it down and I ran a 42:49. So
Amazing,
if I just let myself kind of ebb and flow with how I'm feeling, that's usually how I can get the best out of myself on race day. And I just totally overrode all of that for whatever reason. Like, I'd been a bit more public with this goal. I told my coach I'm going to be with the 320 group, all of these things. It's completely still on me that I didn't make that decision. And again, that's the only, I guess, regret that I have, because you and I both know, like, marathons are hard, but racing is just like, you show up to a race feeling however you're feeling, given everything that's going on in your life.
Yeah.
And we'd had some crazy travel down to this one too. Like you mentioned, it was December 20th. So we had pretty much been up like at it for 24 hours, like trying to get out of Winnipeg to get down to Arizona because of this huge snowstorm that had come in. So it wasn't really ideal travel there and everything like that. So I was probably a bit impacted by that too.
For sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, travel is stress. I think so. Anytime I fly or go for a long car drive, like my sister lives about 5 hours from me, and like my watch will tell me, like, you've had a stressful day. We know travel to be stressful, whether it flows the way it should, or we're kind of in these like situations where nothing's really working out and it just takes a lot longer to get to our destination. So let's fast forward in the race then. Did you stick with the 320 pacer up until you decided to DNF the race, or did you fall back and try and run with 325 for a while? Can you kind of talk us through that?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I really had this internal battle for most of the first half of the race of, do I stay with the pacer or do I execute my own plan? Again, I stayed for far too long. So it was about 18 and 19K, I think, which is 11 to 12 miles. And I finally said to the pacer, I'm like, you know what? I'm fine, but I'm just going to drop back a little bit, like just a few seconds a mile, because sometimes that can do it. Like even 5 seconds a mile when we're on these kind of edges, I feel can just be enough to just, all of a sudden, okay, no, this feels good. This feels sustainable. And so that's what I did at around, 12 miles or so. But I knew that was probably a little bit too late. I was hoping not, but something inside of me said, no, I should have done that at K. If I'd done that at 5K, I might have been able to salvage the rest of the race, but doing it at 19K or 12 miles was probably a little bit too late. Now, that said, I kept on going. I think it was about 17 miles that I finally stepped off. I had been caught by first then I had a bathroom thing and I'm like, I was running with a woman and I'm like, you go ahead, I'm just going in the porta potty or whatever. That was just before halfway.
Yeah.
Because I came out of the bathroom. I think I was only in there for like a minute or something, but I came out and then crossed the 13.1, like crossed the halfway mat in 141. So we were still kind of on it, but it just did not get better after over the next 4 or 5 miles that I just stepped off at 17 miles.
No, it was obviously like in your mind throughout the entire part of the race, how tough the pace was feeling, how it wasn't your day. Did you make the decision to step off? Was it like a quick decision, or were you like, okay, I'm at maybe like a kilometer away from this, like maybe you're coming through a loop or there's a table or there's, some people there. I'm going to step off then. Like, was it kind of premeditated or was it like a sudden decision?
It was okay. I'm laughing because I heard Ben Rosario, the founder of this race, talking about this. Like, a looped course is awesome when it's your day. because it can help, just
Builds
psychologically
momentum.
chunk the race down. Yes, yes. And especially this one, it's essentially 6 loops. So it's like the first 2, you could be like, okay, cruise, cruise these ones. And then the next 2, you're picking it up. And the final 2, you're crushing or something like that. Like just so easy to break a race down when it's in these loops. But when it is not your day, it is so hard to run loops and keep running by the finish line,
Yeah.
essentially, you know?
Yeah.
And so, interestingly, I knew some people out on the course, and one of them was going to be running in the pro race the following day, just a woman from Canada named Leanne. And when I ran by her at, I forget what it was maybe 24K or so. I'm like, Leanne, I think I'm going to drop out. And she started like running along with me and diagnosing the problem. She went right into coach mode. It was so awesome. She's a coach as well. And she was like, what is it? Like, what's going on? And she was trying to diagnose, like, is it an injury? Is it that? And I'm like, no, it's just not. It's just not. Like, it's just like I'm running through quicksand. It's like my feet and my calves are on the verge of cramping like every single time. And I'm at 24 or 5K. Like it's a long, long, long way to go feeling like this. The way I've been able to describe it to people is I felt the way you would maybe expect to feel around 39K.
Yeah. Right at the end. Yeah.
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 And you're like, I can grit through this for another 2, 3K. I can totally
Absolutely.
do this. Yeah. You're psyching yourself up. But if you've been feeling that way since basically your first step, and I've been there, I've had not, I guess I've had races like that, but I've had like workouts, long runs where you just feel like you're dragging a bag of sand behind you. You just feel so heavy. Your legs won't turn over. It's a really tough place to be because it feels like you're a little bit outside of your own body. It's
A
like,
little
what's
bit.
going on?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing that you bring up there because I think what I love so much, and even whenever I set a time goal, for example, like I did in this race, it's really because of the way that running feels. Like I feel competent, I feel coordinated, I feel like there's an ease to this craft, I guess.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel any of that. I felt like a baby deer, like walking for the first time or something like that. It just, nothing felt normal or right or the way that it, quote, should, And so it's such a nuanced thing to try to describe. But I think anybody who's been there might be nodding along is that, could I have kept going? Yeah. Like I definitely could have finished if I just slowed down, but that wasn't even what I lined up to do. It wasn't just to line up and like prove that I can finish a marathon. That wasn't, and again, if you want to prove to yourself that you can finish a marathon, like that is amazing. I love you. That just wasn't my mission on that day. So when it was very clear that the mission wasn't happening and nothing about my goals were going to be coming true that day, it just didn't feel worth it to put my body through the stress. I mean, one of your questions, I think, was it what was harder, the physical decision to stop or the mental aftermath, like after the race? I would have had the mental aftermath even if I'd finished. I know I would have. You know what I mean? So I was like, do I want to have to recover physically and also mentally, or do I just want to have to recover mentally? So, yeah.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I think when things aren't lining up and you're out there for a very specific goal, like I ran the Chicago Marathon in the fall and I was very specific with what I wanted to do and what I wanted to create, but I was injured over the summer and I was trying to put together a training cycle and I really didn't know if I was going to race until about 2 weeks before. And there was this very specific workout I ran where it gave me enough confidence to say, okay, I can at least shoot my shot and really go after this in a really like with integrity and go after it. I could jog a marathon at this point any day if I wanted to, right? There gets to be a point in your endurance journey where that's not really what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to do something great and have that outcome time and also see all of our process goals throughout the cycle play out with that outcome time. And I had a lot of people kind of push back on me and they were like, I don't understand why you just don't go. And like, who cares? Like, run a 3:30 if you want to. And I'm like, that's not it. It's like,
Yeah.
there's just so much that goes into it. And your body, regardless if you're running, a 3:05 or a 3:30, you're still, or a 3:20, you're still going through a lot of stress, a lot of muscle breakdown. Your organs have to repair after that marathon. And it does take a long time to recover. You have the Boston Marathon coming up. So I'm sure that was like probably in the back of your mind too, of like, I can just cut this off now. Like, let's just stop. And I save myself, an hour plus of running and all of the recovery that's going to come from that. What was kind of the mindset process like after the race, like in the coming weeks when you were public with this goal on Instagram? I love your Instagram, by the way. You're so great. And you were public with that goal. You have to face how you responded and how you reacted. And I'm sure you got a lot of feedback in all different areas, right? All different ways. How did you flow through that?
Yeah, and maybe to some extent I'm still flowing through that. So it's interesting when I think about, that marathon back in 2015 that I did, which is still my personal best, right? No one knew who not that many people know who I am, but my running is a tiny bit public now, just with being the podcast host and everything.
Yeah.
So, and then I'd taken the extra step, inspired by somebody that I've had on my podcast before, to be public about it. Like, I thought it would be kind of different and fun, and I really didn't. I thought long and hard about doing that because I'm like, will that feel like extra pressure? But I really weighed that all out and I didn't think that it would. I thought it would just be fun to bring people along this time. And now because of that, I absolutely owe it to people to close the loop, right? And that's been a real journey in and of itself. Overwhelmingly, people have been wonderful and kind and super, super supportive. But for anyone who's sort of faced any type of a public fall on your face type of thing, it's like, oh my gosh, I want to be honest. I feel like I owe it to people to be honest. And being honest about kind of how I'm feeling about it has been interesting, actually, because it has brought up a lot of like unhelpful self-talk. Like, my self-talk is not always my best friend. And that's probably the biggest area of opportunity or area of growth coming out of this, which is not a bad thing. Like, I think, quote, failing at this has offered more in terms of that growth opportunities than I ever would have got if I nailed it. If I nailed this race, if I ran my personal best, or especially under 3:20, you want to know what I would have said? My training was amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't just think this result was possible. I knew it. Like, I had so much confidence like I've never had before. That's what I would have taken away from it. Everything's going great, you know? Whereas this has really, really caused me to be like, what in the heck happened? And then to do that publicly has been just an extra little challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I think anytime you're going through a situation where you have to flow through for growth because whatever you have in front of you isn't working out the way that you wanted it to, and you're a public figure and people know what's happening, there is this unique opportunity to grow through it where we wouldn't necessarily have that if everything came easy. For sure. I'm a big believer in that. And even though when we don't want to grow, right? Like, maybe you had said to yourself a few times or thought about this, like, well, I don't want to experience this. I don't want to have to go through this in order to grow, because there are so many emotions and so many different things that can come up in those days after the race, and probably replaying it and wondered like, oh, could I have just pushed harder? Could I have just kept going? Maybe I should have surged. Maybe I could have done this, could have done that. We've all been there. We've all been there. What would you say, like, your greatest lesson that you learned out of this so far, because you might still be in that process of it, that you're taking with you into your next marathon, which is coming up in a few months on Marathon Monday?
Yeah. Well, I think again, it's the biggest area for growth is certainly just how I sit with disappointment. I am
Yeah.
disappointed, and I've had some people push back saying that I shouldn't be disappointed, and I've really been open-minded to, okay, maybe I shouldn't be disappointed. Like, is there a kernel of truth in what they're saying here? But I think when we in a case like this, I think being disappointed is a completely normal and appropriate response,
Yeah.
right? If I had of if my preparation had have been subpar or something like that, then maybe not. But I feel like I'd sort of dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. So I'm a little bit like confused, I guess would be another word. So how do
Yeah.
I sit with like confusion and disappointment and like do it all sort of publicly? It is
Yeah.
sort of where I'm at. But what was the second part of your question?
How, like, the lessons that you've learned, the greatest lesson that you've learned through the marathon project, DNF, and what you're taking with you as you train for Marathon Monday, which is
Okay.
coming up in a few months.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
quick
Okay.
turnaround.
It is. And I don't normally do that. I'm not and again, if this story finished the way that it was supposed to finish, I would have PR'd this marathon on Boston for fun, rode off into the sunset, and never ran another marathon for the rest of my life. Because
So, yeah.
if I'm being totally honest, it's not my distance. I find it very
Yeah.
all consuming,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I
We
actually
are
feel
allowed to
a
hike.
little, yeah,
You
I
mentioned
feel
that before we started recording.
a bit more excited about shorter distances, a bit
Yeah.
more. I just feel like they fit into life a little bit better. I feel like I'm better at say the 5K to the marathon than I am or the
Your
5K to
five.
the half marathon.
Yeah. Your
And
5K
so
time is incredible.
yeah, so I think that yeah, if the story ended the way maybe I had written it in my mind, that's what would have happened. And now that it didn't, I'm like, oh my goodness, like okay, I can't. I there's just something about the marathon itself that still excites me.
Yeah.
And so what am I taking forward is that sometimes you can do absolutely everything right and not get the result you want. And that's just life. Like that, so much of the marathon is out of our control. I still have no idea what happened. I think it's always important to go back after, especially after a disappointment, but even after a success, I think, and really do a postmortem. Okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? What will I change next time? I think that's just a really good exercise to go through.
Absolutely.
And and I tell my coaching clients this all the time, especially anybody that has a disappointing race. I'm like, it might have just been nothing. You hear this from elites all the time. You think of your favorite elite. They've probably bombed a marathon. And sidebar, the next day we go out and watch the professional race of
Yeah.
this because they had a whole separate day where the elites raced, which was so much fun, actually. So many of them DNF'd.
Yeah.
And so as I'm sort of still in this very much processing phase, like not even 24 hours later, I'm like, you're not special. And I don't mean that in a diminishing way. I'm just like, that's just kind of part and parcel of the marathon territory in many ways. And so it just makes me feel even more convicted when I say that to athletes, that it could just be nothing. Like if you like revisit your why, like why do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And if you feel like you want to try again, line up and try again. The marathon is not going anywhere,
Yeah.
you know? And I do, like there's still part of me. I remember back in I think it was 2014. So I'd had a couple years of doing the 5Ks and the 10Ks, and the times were still coming down and down and down. And I had set the goal in 2014 to get under 19 minutes in the 5K, under 40 minutes in the 10K, and under an hour and a half in the half marathon. And I lined up. I did the 5K one in Boston, 1858. The following month, I went to Ottawa. I did the 10K, 39:50 something. And then on paper, the half marathon was actually the easiest one of them all, but I wasn't going to try till the fall. So I line up in September, 1:30:21.
Whoa, so close.
And I was so bummed about it. Like most people are like, well, you basically did it. And I was like, no, I didn't do it. I'm going to line up again.
Yeah.
Like 6 weeks later or something, I lined up again, 1:30:13.
Whoa.
And
That
I
barrier.
just remember that being something that equally frustrated and confused me, much like what I'm feeling right now,
Mm-hmm.
and excited me and made me incredibly driven to go back
Mm-hmm.
to the drawing board. How do I get better at the half marathon? And it was the following year, 15, that I didn't just break 1:30, I broke 1:29. And so part of me is kind of remembering that in terms of, yes, everything worth pursuing in life, anything meaningful, usually takes a little bit longer than we would like it to take.
Yeah.
And so that half marathon success, I guess, took me 2 to 3 years rather than 1 to 2 years type of thing. And I think it's just a little bit more exponential with the marathon because it's not just half, it's not just double the half, right? It's exponential in ways that are hard to describe until you get into it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What are you doing to help with your self-talk as you head into this new cycle?
Well, you can't really address something that you don't know is happening. So, the very first step, and I would say I'm still in step number one, is just becoming aware.
Yeah,
Becoming
that's right.
aware of it's like our self talk is so part of us. This is my understanding. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but it's just been with you forever. And in many ways, it just feels like you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no separation between the voice in your head and you
Mm-hmm.
until you start to put some awareness on it, and until you so I've been doing a lot of journaling
Good.
about it, and it's wild how unkind I can be to myself, and I would never be this way to anybody else. So just the noticing of it and the what would I say to a friend kind of, that's the phase that I'm
Yeah.
in. And I always find it very encouraging that my natural default setting with other people is to be so kind, because it serves as evidence that I maybe someday can be that way with myself. It's not a completely foreign concept.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you can. I think the self-awareness is, I think, the biggest step. And once you have that, you can start to flow through a process that really serves you and that really helps for you in your training. Something that really helps me, because I can get that way too, is I will like literally out loud when I start a rep or start a run, I'll tell myself, like, you can do this and
Yeah.
start. And I'll say it
Yeah.
out loud with conviction. I'm confident. And whether there's people around me or not, and it makes such a big difference than the, I'm not sure if I can do this, you're so slow, like all the things that kind of
Mhm.
come up,
Mhm.
or this feels really hard. I think anytime we say that, it's an immediate downer, right? The hard. Something that I share with my athletes is like trying to flip that script of like hard is intense. And when you say this is intense, it has a lighter feel to it that you're able to kind of flow through it a little bit better. Maybe not exactly how you want, but it is a little bit lighter than this is so hard or this
Yeah.
feels
Yeah.
hard. Because I think that's a phrase a lot of us use anytime pace or whatever isn't feeling great.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, you went into this race with an expectation of PRing and probably with like the expectation of, I'm going to comfortably run a 320. Like, this should feel pretty darn cruisy. And maybe I cut down at the end of this race and really like give everyone a show for people who are tracking me on the app, which is always so fun in the marathon. What did you learn, if anything, like about your relationship with expectations that day?
Yeah, I learned that it's much, much, much better to keep your expectations low. Well, especially in, again, the marathon,
Yeah,
which
in the marathon for
A
sure.
is just a different beast, like we've been talking about, than the half marathon and down. And also is historically a distance that I don't feel like I've mastered yet.
Mm-hmm.
That it
Yeah.
probably would have been better to keep my expectations a little bit lower and then be pleasantly surprised. I guess I thought that I did that with the strategy that I had. If the thing that for sure I will be taking into my next race, which, as you said, is Boston, just completely running it by effort.
Yeah.
because I think our culture, I guess, is a little obsessed with times, and maybe I've gotten, and I mean,
Yes.
whenever I set a time goal, it's always to reflect a feeling anyway. Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
or like I was describing before, like that feeling of competence, or that feeling of like I just know how a 10K should feel versus a 5K versus a half marathon. And then we layer on the time that kind of lines up with that. I think I'll probably never do that again in the marathon. And it's not to say that I don't believe in myself or that I'm letting go of any thought to personal best in the future. It just
Yeah.
won't be the front and center goal ever, because you can feel so different from one race to the next. And the travel that I had and all the, like, I'm 48, like, hello perimenopause, and I've
Yeah.
aged 6 years since I set this goal to break my personal best. And it's like the goal has never changed, and all of these different things have happened, and I just think it's unfair to expect anything out of myself in terms of that. But I haven't let go of the belief that it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I love that because it can absolutely happen. And I really love that you're leaning into your strengths, which is running on effort. You mentioned that earlier in the episode of running in a time where we really didn't have GPS watches and we really had to rely on how we felt during the rep and really knowing our bodies and knowing ourselves. And you posted something on Instagram about doing just that at Boston. You're going to still wear your watch because you're so into the data, which I love after the fact, but like you're going to cover up your watch with tape. And I think that's super smart because lifting to that, like maybe that unknown pressure or a feeling of needing to attain a certain outcome sometimes leads to the breakthrough because you're running more relaxed, you're running more freely, you're in tune with your body, you're in tune with your breath, you're talking to some people maybe in the first half, we'll see. And it can be a really fun way to run. And something I like to do for anyone who's listening about, like, I don't know, how do I run on effort? I am so attached to the watch. I always like to play a game with myself. Anytime I'm out running intervals, like, okay, I'm targeting X pace. This is the effort. I'm running what an effort should feel like for this pace. How close am I to that pace? And then I'll look down and see how close or how far off I am. And sometimes just repeating that idea in every workout for a little bit of time is going to help you find that effort. You have effort 100% dialed in. How do you feel like you're going to rebuild your confidence going back into another marathon? Do you feel like it's going to come from trusting yourself and trusting the effort, or is it going to be something else?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and because I guess I could see why somebody might think I lost all my confidence from this, but I
Yeah.
actually feel more convicted than ever that I can trust myself.
Yeah,
Right?
good.
Because again, the only regret I have is not at K or 1 mile or before 5K for sure, just dropping back from that group and trusting that those couple seconds a mile, they would come back to me.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe more convicted than ever in the confidence game. I think there's probably certain things that I could do, and especially for Boston, knowing that Boston is the goal and training through the winter, and it's not really my favorite. I feel like that lends itself really, really well to training on effort as well. But the only kind of physical training difference I think I'm going to make is just on that fatigue resistance piece. Like,
Yeah.
I might do a few more, I might throw into my long runs something more like I'll run a big chunk of time at maybe a minute per mile slower than marathon pace, and then pick it up to marathon pace towards the end or something like that. It's just
Yeah.
kind of because marathon is just such a long, grindy
Yeah.
race that
Yeah.
if, historically I've done, a lot of threshold stuff and maybe even some faster than threshold stuff. And I feel like spending a lot of time at threshold in my workouts and then just kind of this moderate type of pace in my long runs will be helpful. So
I love that so much. I'm a big believer in that in my own training of like, running maybe even if it's before a speed session, running a few miles at marathon effort to fatigue the legs before going into a speed session. And then you can replicate that in the long run by those moderate miles and then going into a few marathon miles or kilometers to kind of just, yeah, have those grindy workouts that really do, if you can place them the right way in your training, really do help you get through the marathon versus burn you out before you get to the start line, because it is a fine balance of
Yeah.
making sure, it's not in every run, as you know. And you were talking about adding in and doing this with your plan. So I'd love to know your shift that you're making into this next season and into this next marathon. You are a coach yourself. You were working with a coach before or during the marathon project, but you're taking on a new challenge going into Boston. I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually probably didn't do a great job of explaining this on my Instagram. So I always take a break from my coach in the winter because
Yeah.
yeah, because I do this indoor track business, and so he's not even allowed to program that for me. Like I have to go to the track and do the workout that's prescribed by the coaches there. So
I
that's
see.
one day I don't really need programmed. And then it's a million degrees below zero here all the time. So I usually look at the weekly weather forecast and do my long run, whatever day sort of makes sense with the weather.
Yeah.
So I didn't really need him to prescribe, because I don't know if you're like this, but and it's interesting as a coach, but when I'm being coached and somebody gives me a plan, I'm very like, I do it exactly the way that it's written,
Yes.
and he
I
would be
am that way
totally
too.
fine if I change things around. But again,
Yes.
um, it's extra communication maybe to explain like, oh, I'm moving this and this and this and whatever. And he's probably like, I don't care, But I was like, you know what? I don't actually think, and at this point, Boston, I was supposed to have, gotten the PR out of the way at the marathon project in Boston, was just going to be for fun. So I'm like, I don't even really think I need coaching at all till
Yeah.
after Boston. So it's not like I fired my coach because of this or anything like that, but I'm just going to be coaching myself to Boston and then pick back up with my coach after that. However, I am kind of sort of pretending to be my own coach. I am my own
Yeah.
coach. I'm programming my own stuff, but I'm also having this sort of heavier weight on maybe the psychological piece of it, the feeling, helping to really believe that I'm worthy of this goal.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like
100%.
trust myself, feel like, I guess it's to me always, I'm questioning whether I actually have the self-worth. Like when I told you that story about the half marathon and how I kept coming so close,
Yeah.
like 1:30:21, 1:30:13. Like sometimes I will get very close to a goal and then I just don't deliver when it's
Yeah.
like possible. And I feel like this is happening all over again with this. And I'm like, am I scared of success? Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And is there a self-worth piece under that needs to be updated?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a very normal feeling in some ways because, we're not necessarily as runners like afraid of failure. Sometimes we are afraid of the success aspect and we get in our own way, whether it's physically, mentally, the races we sign up for, the things that pop up in our way as we get through training, all the things for sure. I can definitely relate to that too. What do you feel like is going to be the biggest needle mover then for you as you move forward to kind of break through that piece or that self-belief?
Well, I think just taking the spotlight off of the outcome and moving it onto the process is huge.
Yeah.
But that's not just in the physical training either. That's also in the mental training, like we started to talk about. So back to the way that my self-talk goes, like it's often, I hate to admit it, but it's often like, you suck, you can't do anything right, you're not worthy and deserving of all of this. It's embarrassing to admit this out loud, but those thoughts kind of come in as I'm just getting in the practice of being self-aware and putting these in my journal. I'm like, holy, like, I mean, I just can't imagine how different my life would be if I believed that I was worthy and deserving of anything.
Yeah, it could probably look a little different.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, thank you for your vulnerability with that because that's a really heavy aspect to training. And if you can break through that concept, and that idea that you have of yourself, you'll be able to do anything you want to do. Sub 3 hours,
Yeah.
here you come.
Yeah. I'm also very
On
realistic with
purpose.
my runnings.
Yeah.
I'll
No, I
probably
mean,
never start setting goals like that, but
I feel you. I feel you. It's a lot to take on the marathon distance. It's a lot to train for. I think you and I are very similar in that in the way of like Chicago for the fall was also going to be my like this is it marathon. I'm going to
no
sail
way.
off. Oh, 100%. I'm going to sail off into the sunset because I realize how much time it takes out of life. It's time consuming. It's very time consuming. And I'm not quite in a place in my personal life where I'm content in that space. So I need to spend more time outside of running to be content there. Um and I thought, okay, this is it. Chicago. Probably not going sub 3, but 304, 302, whatever, I'll be happy with that. And I'll be, maybe come back to it in years later. But it didn't end up being that way because the end of the race, I kind of had some stomach issues, but I felt incredible. And then you have that, like the whole, like, oh, the what if, all the things start to pop up. So there'll be another one for sure. But I think it's really important that, if you have the ability to go after your goals, you're still able to do it and you're finding the things that are working that are not working. You went through the exercise of what worked in this training cycle. I had all the data to show me that I could do this. Yeah, I had an incredible training cycle leading up to this race. I had some travel snafus. I started, it wasn't great. There was negative self-talk during the race. I'm now learning and growing through that. And now you can take all of that into Boston and really work on it. It's even small, like little like improvements in how you talk to yourself while you're running or outside of running throughout the course of a week can be that 1% that really moves the needle 10% for you or 100% for you. And it's really like cool that you've uncovered what that is and you're able to move forward with a solution-based kind of system that like I can overcome this. Is it going to be hard? Probably. Am I going to have
Mm-hmm.
setbacks? Probably, because that is definitely part of it. But you're going to be able to overcome for sure because you're self-aware and you know that it is the thing that's kind of like holding you back.
And if you look through that journal, you're like, whoa, that's your self talk. Like, that's a lot of
Mhm.
probably bandwidth that is taking up. And if I can learn to reframe that or, how would I talk to a friend, that kind of thing, like just
Yeah,
imagine what that's going to, uncover, like what kind of extra energy that's going to liberate for me.
for sure. I think the most important part is like giving yourself grace in that journey because it is so non-linear, depending on the day, for sure. But I know you're going to be a lot stronger, through the other side of it.
Yeah, I hope so.
For any runner who's listening today and they're maybe questioning like a setback in their marathon journey, or maybe they've DNF'd, or maybe they are experiencing this highly critical self talk when they're running in and out of the running shoes, because it can happen outside of the running shoes and it impacts your running for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What would you want them to hear today? What
Mm.
what would your advice be for them?
I think the big thing that I'm uncovering from this journey here too has surprised me, but it's that it's the things that we care about. Like it hurts this public, failure or whatever you want to call it hurts because I care about it.
Growth
And
opportunity. This
yes,
public growth opportunity.
public growth opportunity feels so, so big because I care. And
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast recently on, I think, on Rich Roll. It was with Brad
Yeah.
Stulberg.
I listened to that one too. Yeah.
It was so good.
So
And
good.
I think they were talking about, I think that in this particular part, they were talking about, Alexi Pappas had talked about, like, I can't wait till it's cool to care again.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if I could offer anything to somebody who feels like, why do I care so? Because that's my self-talk. My self-talk is like, why do I care so much? I'm really not that good. Helpful, right? Because like, and I mean that in the, like, I follow elite running. Like, I know what really good running is. Like, I'm not there, right? Like, I'm not making a paycheck. There's no prospect of me making a paycheck. Why do I care so much? And I sort of say that to, like, snap me out of, like, oh, if I'm feeling, a certain way about it. And it's like, no, but I actually like that I care about things. Like, not to wallow and stay here forever, but just like, I care, it matters to me. I like that I'm spending time doing things in my life, trying to get better, trying to master a craft for no other reason than it just brings me joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely love that. And I think it's important to know that caring does count. It creates you as a human. Otherwise, you would be a shell of a human if you didn't have things that you cared about. And it is cool to care.
Yeah. So I'm here to make caring cool again.
I love it. I mean, if that's your mantra going into the Boston Marathon training and race day, I think that's going to set you up for success for sure. I mean, hands down, it's a win because you have stood up, you have dusted yourself off, you have addressed some opportunities of growth. And I think that is so inspiring because many times we can go through something that's really hard and, like you said, sit in it or ignore it or pretend it didn't happen, cover it up, avoid it, and move on. Suppress it, move on. It's going to creep back up at some point if we do that. And facing the hard reality and growing through it and becoming a stronger human, a stronger runner because of it is not only going to help you, it's going to help your athletes, it's going to help your children. I'm sure are like so inspired by you and how their mom is showing up in this season. And I just think it's a really cool story. And at the end of the day, I just hope you give yourself a little bit grace as you go through it.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
It's already better.
Is there anything that you wanted to share today that you didn't get to share with the audience?
Again, I think from my personal story, it all comes back to trusting yourself. If you are working with a coach, and maybe this is a special message to the people that I coach, it's like, why didn't I listen to myself in that moment? Well, I didn't want, like, I told my coach I was going to stay with this pace group. I told everybody on Instagram that this was the goal and stuff. It's okay to change your mind in the thing based on how you are feeling.
Yeah.
Right? And
Absolutely.
We can practice that in training too. Like, if you show up to a workout or you show up to a long run or something, and it's just feels wrong. Like, it feels too hard for the way that this particular session should feel. It is okay to modify it. It is okay to go slower. It is okay, like, to trust yourself.
Absolutely. That is a great final thought tip. Everyone gets to practice it this spring as you're going into training, as you're going into running. I'm definitely going to practice it. Flexibility is part of my 2026 and just being flexible with the day and what I can and can't do. And I think that how we show up on race day is how we show up in training. So if we can practice that in training, it's going to go a long way on race day. And I know you got that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you have a good coach, and I know anybody listening that's coached by you has a good coach, they will be completely fine with you making that shift on the fly. Like, I think empowering your athletes to have the autonomy to make their own decisions is part of really good coaching. I always joke that I'm trying to sort of like coach myself out of a job. If I do my job really well, then people should feel like they can kind of put together a week of training or a month of training that really fits into their life, into the constraints of their life. And I think kind of these sort of finer points about, changing things up on the fly in a workout or a race is just kind of the next level of that.
Absolutely. I think it's so important, and it always gets like the clap from me of like, yes, I'm really glad that you did this. You needed to do this for all these reasons. And instead of asking permission, right? It's like, I did this. This is why. It's inspiring to see, and it's a growth aspect to that athlete for sure. And I'll even have athletes that I'm working with for a few years. And if they reach out to me before, I'll be like, well, what do you think you should do?
Yeah.
You know,
They
like,
usually know.
yeah, it's like, it's okay. You can make these decisions, like, for sure. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Caroline. Where can our audience find you online and share more about your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is Inspired Souls, and it is wherever you find your podcasts on Apple and Spotify and all the like. So that is on Instagram. The account for the podcast is at Inspired Souls Cast. And then my own personal running, which I think is the one that you were talking about before,
Yes.
where I share kind of all about my own running and travel and stuff like that, is at carolyn.c.coffin. So those are the two best places.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you for sharing your story and being vulnerable and giving us really great like background on your running and where you're going. Good luck to you in everything that you have coming up, and prove yourself right at Boston.
Yeah, well, thank you. I want to really thank you for all of the great questions you prepared very well, and I sure hope we get to meet in person someday in the future at a race.
I'd love that. Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening.